Emily Elizabeth, and I'm the host of the What Fulfills You podcast, a show for and about individuals always seeking to be their best selves. On this show, we talk all about building the mindset, finding the right careers, creating meaningful relationships, and so much more. Welcome to the What Fulfills You podcast. Well, Maria Alexa, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to dive into your journey because it's obviously, in my opinion, a little bit less conventional and definitely, right, you're in music and you're going into an industry that's, has a lot of what ifs, right, and a lot of risk with it. But I think what I loved most, as I just shared with you, is how you started when you went to school. You started out at least knowing a direction of what you wanted to do. And I love that you ended up going into PR and you had a lot of experience there. And yet, you're still going to take it over into, your actual music career. But can you start with sharing the process of how you figured out that you enjoyed doing that, being in PR and comms and whatnot?
Sure. So I would say I always loved to challenge myself when it came to anything creative or helping people. I think that's always something that I just innately always knew I wanted to do in some sort of way. And it was a long journey to get to the publicist part, but I think it makes sense because as a publicist, you do in fact help others, whether it's more visibility on a project or really challenging them to do the best and be the best that they can be. And I feel like when I do that for other people, it makes me better. And I think that's why I really enjoy it. But I would say it's not something that like music, for example. I don't really remember a time where I didn't want to do music. I always loved music. I was always surrounded by it. I've just remember playing piano at 4 years old. It was just always in me, ingrained in me. And also because it helped me, because I went through a lot as a kid. I went through a lot of childhood trauma that I've since healed from. It's therapy.
Yeah.
But I would say getting into PR and comms, it was very exploratory because I first started out in college studying psychology. I always wanted to be a child psychologist, which I might still do maybe later on in life, because I went through a lot as a child, and that process was a lot. And I felt like the therapists and the psychologists that I spoke to, some of them helped me get through really hard times. And also there are things that I thought, I could do this better. I feel like if maybe there's a different process.
Right.
And so that's kind of how I started, is because I actually had to do that from the ages of because my parents went through a custody battle. So for 5 years I had to kind of go to group psychology sections with my parents and all of that, and individual with my brother. And so then I just wanted to study it, and I loved it. I loved learning more about how much it affects you in your young adolescence, and the different things you have to unlearn when you're older to be better, to continue to learn, to not bring over any of those traits into your adult life. So that's how I got into that. And then I actually ended up transferring. So I studied psychology, and then I ended up transferring to Geneseo, which is upstate.
Okay.
And the classes weren't the same. The teachers weren't. It just didn't really feel like I wanted to do it anymore. So I kind of lost the passion for it. And then that's when I started researching what else I could do. Honestly, I was like, what else? I know I want to do music. I don't know how I'm going to do that. Literally no idea. I want to do it. My parents would always be like, no one's going to come to the door and be like, are you ready to be a singer now? So I always did music, acapella, chorus, chamber, whatever, but I didn't know how to get to the professional level. So I had to figure out, what I'm going to do for because my parents aren't from the industry. They don't know how to get there either. They were always super supportive, but nothing like that. So then I was like, you know what am I really good at? I've always been really good at social media and just anything in terms of online. I was one of the first on Instagram with my friends. I was always doing coding on Tumblr.
Yeah.
Okay, how can I try to make this into something that maybe I can major in? So then that's when I started dabbling into comms, and I was really good at public speaking, and it never really bothered me to be in front of people.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it went from that to comms, journalism. after I graduated, I ended up doing an internship at Inside Edition
Mhm.
because my uncle who passed was an executive producer at Inside Edition. So I was
Mm.
like, let me try this part of comms.
Yeah.
Did not like it.
Okay.
Could not be someone that could wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and take the train or like
Right.
be at a on site at like a in a newsroom. It just wasn't something that I found interesting.
Right.
So then he was like, well, why don't you try public relations? I have a couple, relationships at different PR firms.
Right.
And give them your resume.
Right.
And then I ended up getting an internship at a all women led PR firm in the city that focused more on nonprofit. So I was like, oh, this is perfect.
Yeah.
It's helping people
Yeah.
and visibility, and it's in the city. And so that's kind of how my PR world started.
Yeah.
Long-winded.
I really love that because, something I've observed a lot with, girlfriends of mine, I'm sure you've seen it in your own friend circles as well, but a lot of people actually struggle with actually like knowing what they want to do.
Yeah.
And I think more importantly what you shared, which I love, is that you went through an experience of working at Inside Edition and then you didn't like it.
Mhm.
And so you're actually able to take that as a learning experience of, okay, this is not the area. And it's cool too, right? And it's funny because I recently wrote up like a more career related episode where I talked about this, but it's perhaps not that you don't like being in PR or like that realm, but rather like switching, like let's say you go from like tech to fashion, for
Right.
example, right?
Mhm.
Or like nonprofit to fashion,
Right.
right? And so I think those, I don't even know what the it's like a parallel, it's still in tandem, but it's like you're still in that world, but in a different, I think, business market that I think a lot of people actually don't hear. So I can just imagine if I was listening to this and thinking like, okay, I know I want to do social media, but I hate doing it for fashion, right?
Right.
Like maybe it's like actually just going to a different business market where it's
Mhm.
more enjoyable. I feel like I just don't hear that story often because I think people are going, okay, let me go from sales then to finance,
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's actually just switching which arena that you're in.
Totally.
Yeah. You also then ended up working with your ex-boyfriend
Yeah.
at his PR agency, I guess you could call it, PR
It's a
firm.
creative agency.
Okay, creative
Yeah.
agency. I really want to know, what was it like working with a romantic partner and then also, of course, working with him once you guys had parted ways romantically? Like, how did you manage that, just from a lens of like, especially since there's maybe at least enough distance from the relationship, perhaps?
Mhm. It's a good question. I actually have never spoken about this publicly. Just to backtrack a little bit from when you're talking about, you know, going from different arenas and different jobs. I think because growing up, I had to go through so many changes. Like I went to like 8 different schools.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I've always had to be forced to be acclimated all the time to different environments.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why I'm able to just like try everything and see
Yeah.
what works. And I also thrive in a little bit of chaos. I do like a challenge. I do like change a
Yeah.
lot, which I think is uncomfortable for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that we could talk about a little bit later because my new job and like
Mhm.
all of that's like a lot for me
Yeah.
in a good way. But going back to working with my ex, so when I was at the PR firm previously to that, I was there for like 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
I started losing passion for it. I was not really into it. I started really getting into my music at that
Mhm.
point after college. Like I started
Mhm.
writing my own songs. I started getting into production.
Mm.
This is now like 7, 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I then met my ex and he was just leaving his job. So he had this idea. We were friends before we started working together,
Mhm.
which I think is important.
Yeah.
And he's like, hey, I have this idea. I think we could do it together. And like his brother was also a part of it. And I ended up actually getting fired from my job. It was like a nice firing, which I've never experienced. I mean, I've never been fired before. It was the first time. And it
Yeah.
was just like, she was like, you need to do music. Like, my boss was genuinely like, I can give you a referral. Like, this
Uh-huh.
is not, you're not passionate here. Like, you need to figure out something else. And I thought that was really nice.
Uh-huh.
And it just happened at a really good time because I was debating, like,
Yeah.
to take that risk to start a company, one, and then also with literally we started dating and started the company at the same time.
Gotcha.
So I ended up being the first hire. It was the
Mhm.
3 of us. It was a lot. I
Yeah.
mean, everyone told us like, this is like the worst idea ever.
Right.
And I don't regret any of it. I mean, 5.5 years later, it was like became like an award-winning company. I've worked with insane people, very talented people. It's opened a lot of doors for me personally, in my professional career, in both as a publicist and as a musician. So it worked out. I would say, I don't want to say I don't recommend it. I think what we did, maybe not wrong, but what we should have probably did was dated first for a little bit and then trickled into working together, because working and dating simultaneously at the same time,
Yeah.
it was a lot. Because
Yeah.
to answer your question about how that worked, it was hard. It was a
Yeah.
challenge. I mean, it was great in the beginning and it was fun and it was all those things, but then you got to a point where like work became everything.
Right.
I became third.
Yeah.
Sometimes I became seventh.
Mm.
And so I became kind of like I would dissociate, to be honest.
Yeah.
I would, because I would just have to like detach my emotions, which you should in the workplace for
Right.
sometimes.
Right.
But it became all the time.
Mm.
And that's where like I personally fell out of love. It just like it wasn't there for me. I'm a very passionate person.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm such a romantic, like I'm such a lover. And
Yeah.
when that was stripped from me, it kind of just became like I was in a daze. I didn't even know what was going on.
Mm.
And I ended up going to like a writing camp. This was like probably like 4 months before I broke up with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote this song called Comfortable.
Mm.
And it's exactly that feeling of like, are we even still in love, or is it just like, are we just walking through life?
Yeah. Like
Wake Me,
coasting almost.
yeah, and Wake Me Up is also about that too. It was like such a
Mm.
frustrating, it was like the first time, actually, now thinking about it, talking out loud with you, where like I didn't challenge myself.
Mm.
I didn't like get out of that uncomfortable situation, even though it's better, I feel like, to be in an uncomfortable situation somewhere new where you're not unhappy,
Yeah.
and like going into like the unknown, than
Right.
being in something every day and expecting something different to happen.
Okay, I love that you bring that up, because I think this is very relatable for every, well, to speak, because a lot of female listeners are listening to this. Every girl might be in a relationship, who's listening right now could be in a relationship in their 20s right now and knows that feeling, right?
Yeah.
We've all like, I swear we've all been there to some degree, right? And I certainly was there in my very first serious relationship, where I was with him for about 3.5 years, and luckily very, very smooth breakup. But it was one of those, because it was so early on for me, it did take me like probably 6 to 8 months from the time that I realized this was no longer it to the time that I actually walked away from the relationship, right? But as you probably know, there is this struggle of like, how do I do it, right?
Yeah.
Maybe this will change, or maybe this will evolve into something else. And I think there are very significant differences between that feeling versus there are actual things you need to work on in the relationship, and it's just a rough time, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
But I think there is a distinct feeling of, this is just not it for me, but it's so hard to pull the plug.
It is. And I actually have a couple, my cousin's friends are going through it. My friends of friends, like I hear it all the time. And as I try to give my advice from a distance, because at the end of the day, the biggest part of that decision, you have to do it yourself.
Yes.
You have to learn from that hard decision.
Yeah.
I don't want to make people do things. Again, I'll give my 2 cents.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'll never force anyone to like make a decision. But I would say to anyone listening, it's better to do it, because you're honest to end something that you're not happy in 100%. If you're like, I need to walk away, but let me just wait another month.
Right.
Like, one, obviously you're doing a disservice to yourself and your happiness, because you're going to be fine and you'll find someone better, but also love yourself, be by yourself, all of that. Yes. But you're also doing a disservice to that other person.
I 1000%
And I don't think people think about that.
I 1000%
I want that person to be with someone that wants to be with them.
Yeah.
You know? And I think that's missed a lot of the time.
I love that you shared that too, because it's something that I've always said to partners as well, in a very gentle way, but something I would say in the beginning, whether it's a sentiment about saying I love you, or just the sentiment of seeing something long term, just that for the sake of both of me and the partner, let me go if you start to have reservations or doubts, right?
Yeah.
Especially for the sake of me. And it's like, I would much rather have someone let me go than to hold on to me for an extra 6 months, a year, even 2 years, when I could have been working on myself, and
Mhm.
then once again having that door open to meet someone much more aligned for me. You know
Exactly.
what I mean? Because
Yep.
I do think it's such a waste of time for the other person if you're in the shoes of knowing I don't want to be with this person long term and you're holding on to them. It is, in my opinion, quite actually disrespectful for that person, you know?
Yeah.
And then there's that fear of, well, I don't want to hurt that person's feelings. Right? How did you overcome that if that fear or thought came about where it's like, especially because work was involved too, right? Like that dynamic of you
Yeah.
guys are working together.
I honestly didn't even think about work at that point. I was
Okay.
so kind of just like fed up in my own feelings and
Yeah.
like just like I always know when it's really not meant to be a thing when I'm just
Mhm.
randomly crying because I'm
Mm.
a crier when it comes
Yeah.
to like thing I'll watch like, you know, a video and I'll be hysterically crying on TikTok. But for the most part, like it takes a lot for me to like cry over like just being unhappy.
Right.
And so that's when I really needed to make the decision. And so I actually approached the conversation and he basically was like, no.
What do you mean? Like he
Like
said no
he
to
was like
breaking up?
basically like he I think it was yeah, it was like a really it was hard. I like
Yeah.
it was hard and I didn't know like how to go about it and it was weird and I wasn't like, "We're done." I was like,
Right.
so I think" I was, you know, dancing around it because,
Right.
again, I didn't wanna hurt his feelings, but also it was like, when you're used to being with someone and, like,
Yeah.
this you
Especially
have
for
this, like,
years, right?
regiment of,
Yeah.
like, whatever, I don't know, it was very difficult, the conversation, and so we were like, "Let's try to go to therapy." So then that was something that never happened. So I was like,
Mhm.
"Okay, maybe this'll help."
Mhm.
And we ended up going to therapy months later
Mm.
because it was my idea originally, and then didn't do it. And then
Mm.
when I finally brought it up again to not be together, he was like, "No, let's actually do it." And I'm like,
Mm.
he's like, "Please." I'm like, "Oh, now you want to do it because it's ending." So
Yeah.
then I was like, "Fine." So we went for a couple times, and then it just made me it convinced me more that like this was not it.
Mm.
And we would do duo sessions and individual sessions. And I remember telling the girl in my individual session, I was like, "Do I have to keep doing this?" She goes, "No.
Yeah.
She goes, "I am not here to cater to you
Yeah.
or to him. I'm here to just be kind of like a buffer,
Yeah.
be someone to talk to." So I
Yeah.
was like, "Yeah, I'm okay. I
Yeah.
think I'm good. Like, this really helped me." So then we went into this process, which I recommend,
Yeah.
especially if you work with your partner. It's called uncoupling.
Mm.
And it was kind of a very, like, healthy process on how you can break away from each other in a way that's respectful.
Yeah.
And that's always been him and I, like, disrespectful, sorry.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And because at the end of the day, like, it's a small city.
Mhm.
Nothing extremely bad happened, and I just fell out of love. And
Mhm.
so I didn't want to walk away with anything other than just like, I hope that you do the best
Mhm.
in your life because
Yeah. Do you think that, especially that realization too while you were in couples therapy, do you think you realized that because like of distinct misalignment or like clear differences that you could just tell that we're not going to work long term, or you know what I mean? Because sometimes people also then wonder like, what is it that makes you know that it's the difference between okay, therapy can help versus like it's just not it?
I've never done therapy with like another partner, so I
Right.
can't speak to that, but I would say going to therapy individually for a
Mm-hmm.
very, very long time. I've had good therapists, I've had bad ones. Walking away from a session feeling like a little bit of weight has been lifted off of me and I feel understood,
Mm-hmm.
or they give me a different perspective that I've never heard. Like I remember one of my therapists was like, just because someone says something about you doesn't make it true.
Mm-hmm.
And that was an interesting perspective. So when I like can be like, "Oh, like I never thought about that." I feel like
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of a learning experience. But like with this specific situation, I would say I don't know. I just remember like sitting there and
Like a
him giving
like a
his
gut feeling.
perspective and then mine and like yeah, there was misalignment, but also just like I didn't care.
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh, I'm like at that point."
Right. Oh wow. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
it became that.
Yeah. No, and I love that you share that, right? Because again, like you said, like we all know of especially other girlfriends and girls that are in that position
Yeah.
where they know that they need to do it for the sake of their long-term future and for the
Yeah.
sake of removing themselves from something that's just not
Mhm.
aligned anymore.
Yeah.
But it's hard to do that, right? And so
Absolutely.
sometimes it's just hearing someone else share like, well, I realized that during this time or this moment, or the fact that I just didn't care anymore, is sometimes like that small nugget is like the wake up call for someone else
Mhm.
listening. So I love that you shared that openly though.
Wake
Just
up.
yeah. Okay, but then I'm curious, like being involved in music and songwriting and whatnot, and you shared how you wrote, I don't know if it was one of your first songs or maybe a first like serious song per se, but at that writing camp that you
Mhm.
went to, right, where you wrote about being comfortable and having that realization. How did this big change, from a breakup, how did that impact your music career
Oh,
direction, right? And this is where I feel like it's like that probably is a big catalyst,
it
right?
was like it was just like it's just let's just say I don't regret any of my decisions
Right,
because
right.
the last 2.5 years, almost 3 now,
Since is that since the breakup?
yeah.
Oh, wow, okay, it's been a good amount.
Yeah, we continued working together for 2 years because
Right.
the job market is not it. But I am very grateful with where I'm at right now. Yeah, my music career, my first of all, I would say me loving myself and being confident and being secure, and that took precedent. That came first, and then everything else kind of just followed.
Mm,
I started really working on myself, and it made me more passionate and it made me want to write more. I was writing a song every single day.
mm,
I realized like I was really like hiding that creative person that I always have been for so long. For
mhm.
I didn't even realize. And it just opened the floodgates. And the last 2.5 years has been like such an upwards trajectory in my career. I mean, writing some of my best music. And I say that like almost every day, but that's
Mhm.
like every singer, songwriter. And yeah, it just opened up to opportunities. I would say there were a lot of blocks that I didn't even realize that were happening when I was
Mm,
in that like situation for so long. I've been meeting amazing people.
mhm.
I've been getting opportunities that I would have never had
Yeah.
if I still was in that situation. I played my first music festival, like randomly winning a contest. I performed at my friend's wedding that went viral. So
Mhm.
it just cemented the fact that this was the decision I needed to make,
Mm,
and it's still pushing me to just
yeah.
not give up and keep pursuing that dream because I it's meant to happen.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And earlier you mentioned just like your parents had shared with you that, especially if you want to be a singer, songwriter in that difficult industry, you can't just wait for it to come to your doorstep, right?
Yeah.
How did you have the guts to put yourself out there for opportunities such as like singing at your friend's wedding, who's
Yeah.
also a well-known influencer, and also, I believe you shared that you were opening up for one of like the SNL acts, or
Yeah.
yeah. So like, how did you get in front of those opportunities? 'Cause I think that's also often a curiosity for people is like, okay, this is what I want to do. Now, how do I get in
Yeah.
front of these doors?
I would say, like, going back to my younger self, just like I always threw myself in situations like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I played soccer my entire life as a kid on top of music
Mm-hmm.
always. And then I remember just like not liking anymore. I'm like, let me try kickline. And I did kickline for a
Mm,
year and everyone
mm-hmm.
was like, what? So I don't know. I don't know. It's always just been that way. But I would say just it's your life. Like it's really hard. I don't want to say like don't care what anyone thinks because there are days where I'm like
Right.
I do, but I want to try as much as possible and I want to do as much as I can if it's going to get me to the next opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say again, like I've never had an issue with public speaking or being in front of an audience. Yeah, just like throwing myself into those. And I think the reason why like I don't mind public speaking, like I said, is because I also have really bad eyesight, so it helps
Mm-hmm.
that I can't see anybody.
Yeah.
And I've just been doing it for so long. I've always performed.
How did it come to like, how long did it take to come to fruition though, right? Like there's anyone in a
Yes.
difficult industry right
Yes,
now,
yes, yes.
right? Like going from, let's say singing on videos and posting it online to
Mhm.
actually performing at the music festival or winning that contest.
Yes, I would say a couple things. I would say it's definitely consistency, just
Mhm.
like continuing to do it, not trying to get frustrated, but if you're seeing no movement, okay, how can you pivot a little bit? How can you
Mhm.
change the way you're doing things? Mindset is huge.
Mhm.
You even saying the difficult industry, I don't like saying that. I don't
Mm.
like thinking about how hard it's going to be, or I actually don't even like going on TikTok really that
Mhm.
much in terms of
Mhm.
going on the For You page because then
Yeah.
I find myself comparing and
Right.
comparing yourself to others, like it's not doing anything.
Mhm.
It's one thing to be influenced by other people, like, oh wow, like that was a beautiful song. Like maybe I can write something similar. That's different.
Right.
But if I ever find myself getting into that mindset of like, oh, but they're doing this and and I'm like, no, that's their own journey.
Right.
Focus on yourself,
Right.
because focusing on them is honestly, you're probably going to manifest stuff for them. Manifest it for yourself.
Right.
Mindfulness, visualization is huge for me. That's
Mhm.
kind of, I can't explain how the music festival thing happened. I saw the contest on Instagram randomly. I applied to it. And the reason why I even like was following that account was because I got like into this weird mode and over the summer where I would watch YouTube videos of other people performing and writing down like, okay, like they're doing crowd work this much, or they're holding the mic this way and they're doing this. So I would write it down. And I saw this band that was doing it that I fell in love with, their performance and their confidence. I was like, I want to be that. I want to be a performer, not just a singer-songwriter. How do I do this?
Right.
They were going to a festival that was on my birthday. I was like, let me follow the Instagram account. Maybe I'll go. They posted the contest. So it was like this like interesting like thing that happened.
Domino effect.
Yeah, and then I applied. I got the top 12. I found out that I was in the top 12 the day of my friend's wedding.
Oh, wow.
So then I had to ask everyone at the wedding to vote for me.
Oh, wow.
And then I found out I won like 4 days later.
Oh, wow.
And then I had to just go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I had 2 rehearsals and I just went. And I don't know, I'm not afraid to just, I guess, take risks.
Yeah.
And I would say just do it. What's the worst that can happen? You're still in the same spot. At least you tried.
And I think, you know, too, that's the biggest thing, right? Like you shared how when you're at your friend's wedding, you just like literally ask other people to help, like, you know, vote for you, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's like the small step that I think is genuinely the difference between people that actually end up making it or being in a position of like with these opportunities compared to people that are always wondering how and why or wishing that they were in a different place, right? Is having the guts to literally just ask or nudge for help towards getting you somewhere, you know? And I think when people come from a genuine place of asking like, hey, this is something I love to do. This is what I would love to be, like where I would love to be, like be performing at this festival. Can you please vote for me? I think people most of the time want to just actually help you.
It was shocking actually, because obviously I've been making music forever and Comfortable wasn't my first song. It was Sunshine. I did it during COVID and there was like good feedback, whatever. But the more that and you know when you like post, you know, like a pre-save link or whatever, you could see like the click-through rate. And it's been like okay right here and there. Sometimes they're better than others. But the click-through rate on like getting people to vote was like upwards of like 100 people every single time.
Wow.
Like hundreds of people. And I was like, oh, what am I doing? That's when I'm like, okay. I look at myself, I'm like, what am I doing this time around that's different? And so I started asking people, like close friends, like, hey, what am I doing differently on social about this the contest that I'm a part of that kind of spoke to you more than like what I've done previously, which are interviews. They're like, you just really seem like you want it, and I wanted it for you.
Right. It's crazy when you actually share that and like how much you love and want something.
Yeah.
People are like, all right, she's passionate. I will help you, right?
Yeah.
And it's like weird because you sometimes, I think even I can think of my past self when it's like almost being self-conscious of, is it bad if I show people that I'm this passionate about it? Or it's like, oh, what if people don't want to help me for it? You know, it's like ironic because just being true to who you are, which is saying like, I really want to win this and really want this. People just go like, fuck it, like let's just get this person there. You know, or let's find a way. Like it's like people just kind of jump on the wagon of like, you know, like I like her work or I like her music or I just like her as a person. I want to help her. Yeah. Looking back from the time of when you started like first writing your song and then going through that breakup and everything over the past few years, how long would you say it really took to come to fruition of like getting like the real aha moment of performing, or whether it was at the wedding or maybe something even earlier? Like how long would you say that really took you? Like the behind the scenes of writing in your apartment and singing in your apartment and even publishing music to then actually being in an arena where you're like, okay, I'm moving somewhere.
I would say 2 answers. I would say it's always a journey. It's always been like working its way to where I'm at. Like since I was even 4 playing piano, like it was just always happening, I would say. And I think I do forget that. When I do get hard on myself about like, you know, I'm not not the youngest girl in the business, all this, like, and I try not to think it that way, because at the end of the day, it's like, no, my journey is my journey. If it's
Mhm.
meant to happen, it's going to happen in its own way. And
Mhm.
I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. I think that's really important, to be grateful for where you're at always.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's always been something, everything that's happened to me since childhood to now has created the person that I am today.
Mhm.
But to answer your question specifically, I would say, in terms of like really throwing myself in the industry, I would say since college. So like almost 8 years
Mm.
now, which I think people don't really see that.
Which is why I asked, right?
Yeah.
Because I
Yeah.
think, like, if let's say someone just saw your video from whatever the viral one that went from the wedding, or just like seeing
Mhm.
you even perform like as an opening act, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think it's so important for people to hear how long it took before that occurred, right?
Yeah.
Because there are some occasions where people have this fast success, but that's extremely one off and much more one off than people realize. And to be fair, too, I think just like anything in life, when you don't have the experience of the longevity and the time it takes to like build towards something, it's harder just naturally to be as grateful and understanding of the
Mhm.
process that it takes to be somewhere and earn something. And I
Yeah.
think that the skill sets that you learn along the way in like an
Mhm.
8-year journey is much more invaluable than just having an overnight success,
Absolutely.
you know? And I think that's important, because anyone watching could be like, oh, well, like, did that happen in 2 years? Did that happen, right?
No,
That's what I'm
it
saying, it
didn't.
didn't, right?
No. But yeah, it definitely gives you patience. It gives you a really, really great perspective on like how hard it is. It
Yeah.
is hard. Listen, positive mindset, but it is difficult. I'm not going to say
Mhm.
that it's ever easy. I mean, the transition that I'm going through right now
Mhm.
has been hard, and I actually was having like some conversations with myself, because I do talk to myself a lot. I was like, "Oh my god, like this is so different for me. Like how is this going to affect my music? I'm so in my head." And then without even reaching out to anyone, because I do tend to like try to figure it out by myself, which I think is good, but also not great sometimes.
Mhm.
My dad texted me out of nowhere and was just like, "I'm so proud of you. Like, just know that, every time you make a change in your life, it's never always going to be easy,
Yeah.
and like you'll get through it, and this will
Mhm.
inspire you to write more."
Right.
So I think also a good piece of advice is to always surround yourself with people that genuinely like want the best for you and like have a
Mhm.
similar mindset. And if they don't change it, talk to them about it. Like, no, like, I had my cousin who's my best friend. She was
Mhm.
like, "Well, what's your backup plan?" I said, "There isn't one."
Mm.
"What do you mean backup
Right, right,
plan?"
right.
Don't
No
don't
back
talk to me
Yeah,
about
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
that.
no backup plan. I agree with
No,
you, I agree with
yeah,
you. Yeah,
this is
yeah, yeah,
it.
yeah. You
Like,
go
this
all
is
in.
it.
Yeah.
Whatever part of the music I can be. If I'm just a full-time songwriter, great. If
Mhm.
I'm a pop star, great. If I'm
Mhm.
a cultural artist, great. Stadium art,
Right.
like whatever it's supposed to be. I like that people have like different paths in their careers and
Right.
all of that. And like, sure, if my song pops off tomorrow, amazing. But for me, like, I want to be a generational artist. I want my music to be here for a while,
Yeah.
whether it is me singing, whether it's my writing,
Yeah.
performing. I think it's important to have goals for yourself, but also to
Mhm.
like let go a little bit
Yeah.
and see what's like going to happen.
Yeah. Oh, I love that, and especially the whole no backup plan.
Yeah.
I think you must have that mentality if you are in any kind of entrepreneurial individual
Hmm.
endeavor
Yeah.
where you're not working for someone else, or your ideal is to be kind of like in this zone on your own. You really have to bet on yourself to that degree.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, once again, don't hear it as frequently. Like, if they're listening right now in their 20s, and like there's friends that are like, "Oh, what's your backup plan?" Or, "But what
Hmm.
if that doesn't work?" Or what,
Yeah.
it's like you can't have that mentality
Hmm.
in pursuit of something like this, you
Yeah.
know? Well, to wrap things up, I would love to hear, like, what's your vision for the next, I know you're a visualizer and
Yes.
you think about your future and the things that you want to manifest.
Hmm.
What is your personal vision over the next year or two with music, and also with the new transition for your new job? Like, how are you kind of redirecting that for yourself?
That's a great question. I would say setting my intentions before the new year was really important for me.
Mhm.
So I did a whole vision board, which I've never done. I've done like, I'm obsessed with Pinterest. I have a
Yeah.
thousand Pinterest boards that I look
Yeah.
at every day.
Yeah, likewise.
I actually go to bed and look at my Pinterest boards. I don't like that Instagram is like my last thing I look at. So I'll make sure
Mhm.
I look at something inspirational before I go to sleep,
Right.
unless I'm like really tired, which is a bad sign. But I would say, yeah, I visualized just I want my music to help people, even if it's like a micro cult fan base. I think I really want to build a loyal following of
Mhm.
my music, so that I can start playing my own shows, like in
Mhm.
intimate venues. I'm
Yeah.
not trying to do anything crazy yet.
Yeah.
Even if that is what it's gonna be, I will be grateful.
Mhm.
So I would say music wise, just like really at the end of the day, like I think to also wrap this up, everything that I've ever wanted to do was to help people because I always
Mm.
felt like
I love that.
I've always had to figure out how to help myself
Mhm.
at such a young age and get through really hard times. And yes, I've had my parents that were very supportive, but still, there were a lot of things that I had to like really acclimate to. And so
Yeah.
I want my music to help others. I like helping other like this year I want to help other anyone in my life, whether
Mhm.
that's like a family member or friends. Like I just genuinely love doing that.
Mhm.
So that's like my end goal with the music stuff
Mhm.
because I every single song that I've ever written, it's from a real experience. I've never
Mhm.
just sat down and been like, I'm gonna write a song about this today.
Yeah.
I'm able to write a very like intense emotional song about something maybe not so emotional. I think
Mhm.
that's a little bit that's different. I'm able to kind of, you know, over dramatize an emotion. But at
Mhm.
the end of the day, like everything is a part of me. And I think when that when that does happen, people can relate to it more and it can help them. And I've had people tell me that it's helped
Yeah.
them.
Wow, that's
So
amazing.
yeah, I would say
Yeah.
that just like a little bit of like building a bigger fan base, growing in general as a person,
Mhm.
continued health and success and love and just very simple. Not
Yeah.
asking for much, but
Yeah.
hey, like if I am able to do stadium tours in a year, I'll take that too. Whatever's meant to be.
Gotta dream big,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
In reflection of everything, and final question, something I ask every guest, but in reflection of everything, what would you say ultimately fulfills you in life?
I would say love and passion.
Mhm.
Everything I do is with love. Everything I do is with passion. For other people, for myself, everything is fueled from that. And I think something that I really want to be a representation of is you can love the way that you love without being judged for it. And I
Mhm.
think
Mhm.
that's something that I've also learned. Don't diminish who you are and your beliefs and how you love or like how you do things for anyone else, you
Mhm.
know? And that was
Mhm.
like a big piece of I would say like that's like love is like a big part of my brand. I would say
Mhm.
just happened organically because I do
Mhm.
write a lot of love songs or even like falling out of love or
Mhm.
all of those things. And I just think that in this society, like we get really influenced by how others treat
Yes.
others.
Yes.
And I am not ashamed of that. I think, you know, if people think I'm cringe because I post about like romance, so I don't care. You know,
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
if you want to live your life like that, that's fine.
Mhm.
So I really want to push that narrative that like be who you are, help others, do all these things, fuel your passion, fuel love. But I would say those are the two things that really get me going because I'm surrounded by it from my family. I
Mhm.
give it to myself and I want to give it to the world. Yeah.
Oh, I love that, Maria. Thank you so much for sharing all of that and sharing your story. And I know personally, just hearing that and how relatable just the journey of being a girl in your 20s is, I
Yeah.
know a lot of listeners will definitely take something from this. But before you leave, share where everyone can find you, share your social media, your Insta, TikTok, your
Yeah.
music, where they can listen to your music,
Absolutely.
and
Well,
your favorite song that
oh,
you have out that you want them to listen
okay.
to. Like the first song, if they were to go Spotify right now, what's the song you think they should listen to?
Okay, well, first I want to say thank you for having me,
Of
and I'm sorry I
course.
was late. Um, at least I'm consistent. Where you can find me, Maria Alexa everywhere, Spotify, Apple Music, all the platforms. It's Maria Alexa on Instagram and TikTok. Be sharing a lot of my new songs on TikTok a lot, some
Mhm.
OGs, and I would say comfortable is
Mhm.
probably the one that people love the most.
Okay.
And then I have a new song coming. I have a couple. I have a lot of music coming out, but I
Yeah.
would say my new song "Scared to Know You" is something you'll want to hear and listen to soon.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This was
Thank
so
you.
awesome.
Thank you.